Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Hello.
And here we go, another edition. What was that hello? Just because you saw yourself is like, I thought we had the new camera lights anyways to let us know. Oh, we're at that angle now. Oh, God.
Do the intro.
Anyway, welcome to Ghost Chronicles Next Generation. I am Ron Kolek, your host, the gatekeeper to the realm of the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. New England's own Van Helsing. With me, the blonde Bombshell, and Kerrigan.
Hello. Can I say hello now?
Yes,
Hi.
please do speak. So anyways, this is our sixth show.
Yes, show number 6.
Sixth video
We're very
production
excited.
of Ghost Chronicles
Yeah,
Next
we've actually
Generation.
made it 6
right?
whole months.
Really?
It's pretty amazing.
When it gets to be 9, then I'll know we made it.
9? What's the
I'm
magic?
just saying.
You give birth at
Give
9
birth
months,
at
right?
9,
Okay.
right, exactly.
Oh, all right.
So then you know you've made it. I don't know. It's a metaphor. What's a metaphor? Oh, we got a live studio audience. Hello, live studio audience.
right.
Give us a little applause there.
And it
Thank you.
every month it gets one person bigger, so
Right.
we're up to 3.
We're up to 3 now. We'd have to start selling popcorn. We can make some money on this, you know that? Anyways, we are here at East Bridgewater again with the live video broadcast of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation. And we have a very special show tonight. So I'm really kind of excited about it.
Yep.
Right? Yes,
Are we
as
gonna-
you are, right?
Are we going to talk about it yet, or are we
No,
gonna keep
because
them
we have to go to
guessing?
your thingy that you do, whatever that
All
is.
right.
So would you like to introduce
All
it?
right, well, without further ado, we're going to jump right into cemetery tripping. So we can roll that clip.
Please.
Welcome to Cemetery Tripping, where I will feature a different cemetery in each episode that I hope you will seek out and enjoy as much as I do. As an avid taphophile, or lover of tombstones, I spend a lot of time in the local New England area in the beautiful and historic cemeteries we have here. The stones here are like no others, and I have literally thousands of pictures of the intricate and symbolic carvings found on them. You can see my pictures on Facebook by doing a search for Cemetery Tripping. The small town of Bridgewater, Mass. Is quite prolific in its cemeteries, with 18 burial grounds in the town, most of them dating from the early 1700s. I am fortunate to live very close by and have the privilege to visit so many colonial-era cemeteries with their fabulous and historic carvings. Today I want to tell you about 2 cemeteries in this fine town. I combined these 2 cemeteries because they both sit on the same piece of land, separated only by a fence. The older of the 2, the Smallpox Cemetery, dates from 1778 and is quite small. It is surrounded by a white fence and contains only 5 graves. Smallpox has quite an extensive history, supposedly emerging somewhere around 10,000 BC. It can be traced to Egyptian tombs and killed an estimated 400,000 Europeans each year, including 5 reigning monarchs, and was responsible for a third of all blindness. This deadly infectious disease killed between 20 and 60% of adults infected. Over 80% of infected children died from the disease. The epidemic hit the Plymouth Native Americans in approximately 1633, wiping out entire population groups. It spread in the Boston area in approximately 1721 and continued to reoccur at various times over the next almost 200 years. So it is no wonder that we see that this small cemetery is placed far out from the main town, on a dead-end road in a wooded area. Even after death, the fear that the disease would spread prevailed. The cause of death is clearly written on the stones of those who met their unfortunate demise from smallpox. The Bridgewater State Farm Cemetery, also known in later years as the State Workhouse Graveyard, is owned by the state of Massachusetts and contains the remains of inmates who were incarcerated at Bridgewater State Hospital/prison. They are also referred to as paupers' graves. The markers only bear a number, except for one grave, which is that of a veteran of the U.S. Navy. I don't know the story behind the Sloan stone, but perhaps because he was a veteran, it entitled him to a stone with his name on it. It is a very sad field on a dead-end street and is no longer used by the prison to bury prisoners. Both these cemeteries offer a glimpse into different aspects of the town's history and carry a sad air about them, even on the brightest of summer days. I hope you have an opportunity to explore even a few of Bridgewater's 18 cemeteries, and that you will take a moment to be thankful that we no longer have to be afraid of the dreaded contagion and often guaranteed death of smallpox.
There you go.
Wasn't that lovely? Haven't you always wanted to know what smallpox looked like?
I
never knew.
I had chicken pox. Is that the same thing?
Oh, I don't think so.
Did you have chicken pox when you were a kid?
Of course.
Yeah. Everybody had that.
No, smallpox is disgusting.
So anyways, that was interesting. Yeah, I guess. Not around supper time, but certainly. So anyways, let's talk about what we really want to talk about.
Yes.
Which is the whole idea of this show. And because we are in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Yes, we are.
This studio is in the Bridgewater Triangle.
We are right in the
And
middle
our
of it.
guest, who is sitting right here, Mr. Aaron
Cadieux.
Cadieux, he is the director, producer. Well, if you're a director, you're a director. Even if you're a co-director, you're still a director. You're still a producer. And you're with us. So that makes you the director or producer. Anyways, Aaron, thank you so much for coming here.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, I mean, I've known a lot about the Bridgewater Triangle, and I think it's a fascinating story. And so I'm really interested in how you got involved to do this.
I guess we got to go back to 2003. I was a student at Fitchburg State College. I was looking for topics for a possible documentary, and I was researching different allegedly haunted locations in Massachusetts. Came across a website about Spidergate Cemetery in Worcester.
Oh, cool.
And somehow stumbled onto Christopher Pittman's website, cellarwalls.com, where he had a whole article about the Bridgewater Triangle. Now, I grew up in Dartmouth, Massachusetts, which is just south of the Triangle. I was about 6 miles down the road from the Freetown State Forest, so I had already heard all the stories about the Freetown State Forest. But as I read more about the Bridgewater Triangle and realized that they lumped the Freetown State Forest in with a larger concept with some other locations within this 200 square mile region, I thought, wow, this is pretty interesting. And so I did a short documentary in college called Inside the Bridgewater Triangle. It was very successful, even though I could never sell it. It was used copyrighted music and images. I was a stupid college student, didn't know what I was doing. And then I gave a copy to a friend who then gave it to a friend. And then before you knew it, I was getting phone calls and emails on like a weekly basis from people saying, how can I get a copy of the film? Cool. So in the back of my mind, I always thought, if I'm ever going to redo this film, I'll do it years down the road when I have more experience and more resources. I'll do it feature length. Fast forward to about 2010, 2011, started putting some feelers out to rebuild the documentary, and came across Manny Famolari, who was planning to do a documentary himself, so we kind of joined forces, and that's how it happened.
Makes it a little easier than that. But, I mean, it's an amazing thing, because for those who don't know, the Bridgewater Triangle is a fairly decent-sized area, filled with stories, Aporia stories, actually.
Mm. And one of the common misconceptions about the Triangle is that it's just the Hockomock Swamp, when that's not the case at all, where it's actually a 200 square mile region encompassing a lot of towns and just bears the name Bridgewater Triangle because the Hockomock Swamp is kind of seen as the epicenter of that. But, like I said, it spreads out Abington at the north, Freetown at the southeast, and Rehoboth at the southwest.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that the Hockomock Swamp is the heart of it?
I think you got to go back to the late 70s when the guy who came up with the whole concept of the Bridgewater Triangle, Loren Coleman, moved to the region. He moved to Massachusetts from California, and he attacked the subject matter from a cryptozoological standpoint because that was his specialty. So he moved to Boston, started getting a lot of reports of strange occurrences in southeastern Massachusetts, particularly centered around this Hockomock Swamp. That's where the first reports started coming out of. And then as he did more investigations, he saw different reports coming out of the towns adjacent to that and slightly outside of that. And that's when he came up with the whole concept of the Bridgewater Triangle. It was the late 70s. The Bermuda Triangle was already a popular subject, so it was kind of a play off of that. And one of the things that we discuss in the film is if it's actually a triangle at all, or if it's just a triangle, it's just a reference point for an area of elevated
Right.
reports
I mean, it's like
paranormal
you
activity.
step over it.
Yeah, would
Right.
would the supernatural adhere to a strict boundary like that? Probably not.
So let's give our viewers and listeners an idea of what we're talking about. I think we have the trailer to the movie.
Sure.
So can we play the trailer to the movie right now, please?
Just have to
Cue it.
look in our clips.
Oh,
and find
okay.
it.
Oh, that's what it is. But this will give an idea of what we're really talking about as far as the Bridgewater Triangle and what's involved in it.
In 1975, I moved from California to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I started picking up on this whole notion that there was an area in southeast Massachusetts that almost was a magnet of weird phenomena, and really noticed it was a triangle.
Whatever it is, we keep talking about this region for some reason.
I certainly think that the Hockomock Swamp serves as the epicenter of activity in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Off in the distance was an extremely large, man-like creature.
I saw something that I'll never forget for the rest of my life.
I saw what appeared to be the Sasquatch creature that I heard about.
Suddenly, I saw something walk. It was about 3 or 4 feet tall. It wanted to get me in its space. This is what I felt like.
A lot of people seem to think that because of King Philip's War, the Native Americans placed a curse on the Bridgewater Triangle region.
One of the greatest paranormal experiences occurred at Anawan Rock. As I turned around, I met the eyes of an older man.
The 1970s in particular were a time of very high UFO activity in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Jerry Lopes and I were heading down to the Rainham dog track, and all of a sudden the stars blotted out in the shape of an arrow as this thing passed overhead.
I almost felt like I could throw a rock at the thing. It seemed that close to me.
I pulled over the Rainham dog track parking lot. I'm right under this orb as it's birthing these ships. What I seen was definitely not from this world.
A lot of criminal cult activity happened in the Freetown State Forest.
We had evidence that a ritual was taking place in the state forest. Then there was a huge amount of calves with the absence of blood.
This mausoleum was broken into, and juveniles actually stole the head out of here.
They believed that they could gain power by drinking from the skull.
Legends and stories about the Bridgewater Triangle will never stop. Nobody can argue that there isn't something very special about this area.
Something real happened here. There's no other way.
I don't believe in the Bridgewater Triangle. I accept it.
So there you go.
It is. I know you haven't seen it, but I've seen it, and
Really?
it's fantastic. So
I'm in it. Does that count?
no.
No.
I'm in it too. It counts more.
I know. Anyway, Aaron, I mean, that was pretty. I mean, that pretty professional job. You know,
thank you,
I mean,
you.
be honest with you. There, if you go onto like YouTube now or anywhere else, there's like 1 million people doing clips and movies and stuff like that. And I mean, that was really a first-class job.
I think that's one of the things that has caught people off guard when we announced that we were doing this and we started to build up some interest. I think people went into it expecting that it was going to be just a bunch of kids running around in the woods with cameras, almost like a Blair Witch Project type of a film. And when they saw what it was, where it's actually more of a historical look at the area with just a little hint of that boots on the ground and different eyewitness reports and expert testimonials, I don't think they were expecting what they got out of it. So it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot, and that's a lot of different ones, and that's really a good. And of course, I did get this cool T-shirt.
Yes, yes. Aaron brought us all T-shirts.
Yep.
Thank
So,
you. We're really happy.
The one thing I guess as we were talking prior to the show, that you're a bit of a skeptic yourself.
I'm a major skeptic.
Okay.
I keep saying I walked into this project probably 99% skeptic, and I walked away from it probably about a 96.
3%, all right.
3% down.
There were 2 stories in particular that I found very interesting in the film. One of them we have a clip of tonight, but there were stories that made me as a skeptic, take a step back and say, well, it's really, really strange.
So doing a movie like this and being skeptical, 99 point whatever, did you find that more of a help or a hindrance?
I found it more of a help, for sure, because if you watch the film, we are not trying to convince anybody of the existence of the Bridgewater Triangle. If you listen to what we wrote, which is everything that you hear from the off-screen narrator, we use a lot of language like allegedly, reportedly, as the story goes. So we weren't trying to jam this down anybody's throat. We would let the eyewitnesses tell their stories, we'd let the experts give their testimonial, and then we just hand it off to the viewer and say, make up your own mind about what you think about the Bridgewater Triangle. It was a very neutral standpoint.
My co-host from Ghost Chronicles International, Steve Parson, he's the founder of Parascience in the UK, and they're very, I guess skeptical is the word for it, but I always ask him, well, do you believe in ghosts? And he will always say to me, well, I believe people believe they see ghosts, and which is true. The eyewitness testimony is their reality. And so that's what you captured on this film.
Exactly, and one of the interesting things about the Bridgewater Triangle is even if it's not real, then what's driving it? What is it about the human psyche, or whatever you want to call it, that's driving the existence or the allure of this region? And what is it that makes it so appealing to people that may be drawn to that kind of thing?
Okay. If anybody in our listening audience has a question, they can join us in the TogiNet or the Parax chat room, or even, I guess, East Bridgewater residents can go into those chat rooms as well and ask questions of Aaron
Sure, why
or
not?
ourselves. So
absolutely.
please feel free. Or if the studio audience, this major audience we have here, if you have a question, just put up your hand and Ann will take your question.
And actually, I see we have a question on a teleprompter from John.
Oh, there you go.
And he wants to know if you and I have ever investigated the Bridgewater Triangle.
Separately or independently?
I don't think he really cares. I know we have not investigated it together.
No.
I have actually never been over there. Honestly, haven't. I mean, I live right. I couldn't live much
You're
closer
in the Bridgewater
to the
Triangle.
Hockomock
Swamp. See, you're always going back to the Hockomock or Squawk, whatever that is. You're going back there. But in reality, anything you investigated here in Bridgewater and the surrounding areas is part of the Bridgewater Triangle. So you have had that experience.
I guess that is the answer to that question is yes, because most of my investigations with my own team have been
East Bridgewater's most haunted,
right in this area.
Yep.
But
so the answer to that question is yes.
Yes, but you've also been in the swamp.
I was just going to say, when people say, have you ever investigated the Bridgewater Triangle, you can't really investigate the Bridgewater Triangle.
Right, that's
the Bridgewater Triangle is a location filled with other locations, so you can investigate one particular location that happens to be in the Bridgewater Triangle. So if somebody says, did you investigate the Bridgewater Triangle? Well, I investigated Anawan Rock, which is inside the Bridgewater Triangle. So that's kind of the more of the way to look at it.
In reality, you have probably investigated the Bridgewater Triangle because you have taken all of these encompassing investigations and you are investigating a particular area and how they're related, correct?
I would say so, yeah.
So I would think you are more of an expert than we are.
Maybe not an investigator, more of a researcher. You know, we didn't do any like boots on the ground. I mean, we did follow Chris Balzano.
What's the difference?
I guess there really isn't a difference.
I mean, don't we investigate like I was going to say the moon, but we've been to the moon. But didn't we investigate, like Mars and the moon before we were there?
Sure.
We did it remotely, but we still investigate it by certain criteria, whether it's, I was going to say eyewitness testimony, but that's a little difficult. But, certain things that we know about it through certain things. Am I even saying that right now?
No, not really.
Let's skip on that one. Move right along.
Now, when you were, I mean, there were obviously many places that you filmed. You cover a lot of ground in this documentary. Is there anything that stands out in your mind where you had any strange experiences?
There was one strange experience, and unfortunately we don't have a clip of it tonight, but we were shooting an interview with Chris Balzano in the Freetown State Forest. Now, this was the only strange thing that happened during the entire production. I'll try to make it a long story short as I can. We were talking about King Philip's War and the wampum belt, that at the end of King Philip's War, But King Philip was killed in August of 1676. Prior to his death, he gave the wampum belt to his war chief, Anawan, to carry on through the war, because I think King Philip kind of sensed that his demise was coming, so he handed off the belt to Anawan.
So what's the significance of the wampum belt?
The wampum belt was a belt made out of wampum, which was the purple pot of quahog shells that the Wampanoag used as almost like a currency of the time. It was like a beautiful piece of shell that could be turned into beads. So they made this wampum belt, which essentially told the oral history of the Wampanoag people. And so Philip gave this belt to Anawan to carry on. Philip was killed in August of 1676. 2 weeks later, Anawan and the last remaining band of Wampanoags at the end of King Philip's War were tracked down by Captain Benjamin Church and a group of colonial raiders. It was like a colonial raiding team with some praying Indians involved. They tracked down Anawan and the last remaining Wampanoags to a location known as Anawan Rock, which is on Route 44 in Rehoboth. As a symbol of Anawan's surrender to Benjamin Church, he presented Church with this belt. And the belt has disappeared from public record. Nobody knows what happened to it. There's a lot of people that think it could have ended up in a museum in England and is like sitting in a drawer in some archive somewhere. Nobody knows where this thing is. Okay. And we were shooting an interview with Chris Balzano in the Freetown State Forest, and he was talking about this wampum belt. And we were shooting in the middle of the forest with a battery-operated light. It was an interview that wasn't even supposed to happen in the first place, but by certain circumstances we were able to shoot this interview. And he's talking about the wampum belt and how a lot of people think that the strange activity in the Bridgewater Triangle will continue to happen until the wampum belt is returned to the rightful owners, the Wampanoag people. As he's talking about this, the lights went out, which was strange. We get everything back up and running, and Matt Manise, who was on the location, said, "Hey, Chris, do you realize that while you were talking about the wampum belt, the lights went out?" And Chris kind of chuckled and laughed and said, "Oh, that's really strange." And then he turns to the side as if he's like talking to the spirits and says, "We hear your message. If I could, I would return it." And as soon as he said that, literally, the lights went out again. And there was a brand new set of batteries in the light. So it was just a really, really strange occurrence. And even me, as a skeptic, it kind of made the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
Wow.
So, you know, that's kind of interesting, because when I first started investigating, and you know the story is that I was originally did it as a TV show for Drake Access Television. And we went to cemetery to shoot some bee footage, and we had fully charged batteries. We got 15 minutes out of all the batteries. It just kept dying one after the other. So maybe this is the same thing that your experience is, some type of a paranormal energy that drained them.
Yeah. Wow.
That's kind of cool, actually. So, I mean, we got quite a few clips, so I'd like to see another one.
Yeah, why don't we roll the clip from the Hockomock Swamp, which involves a Bigfoot sighting by a gentleman named John Baker.
Oh, okay.
Bigfoot.
That clip is entitled John Baker, Russ, if you can find that in the clips.
Yeah, you can.
In addition to Joseph DeAndrade, deceased West Bridgewater resident John Baker reported his own Bigfoot sighting while fur trapping in the Hockomock Swamp in the early 1980s. A Boston Herald article featured an interview with Baker concerning his encounter. The following are direct quotes from Baker, read by the article's author, Ed Hayward.
Something was following me, and I knew it was big. So I took the boat down a small creek to a dry hill, and it kept moving. I knew it wasn't a human because when it passed by me, I could smell it. It smelled like skunk, musty and dirty, like it lived in the dirt. My heart was up in my throat. To this day, I don't know what it was, but I know I saw it, and it was out there.
Okay, so Bigfoot, huh? I didn't know we had Bigfoot around here, other than Mike Markowitz. But anyway.
I'm sure he'll appreciate that.
Yeah, whatever. So anyways, you filmed this clip, and you met this guy too, right?
No, actually, John Baker passed away.
Oh,
so what we did with that scene was we shot a reenactment out at Lake Nipponicket. And
say that 3 times fast.
And John Baker allegedly saw this creature in the early 1980s while trapping on the Hockomock Swamp in a canoe. So we shot the reenactment. We took the excerpts from a Boston Herald article that was written about that case, and we had the reporter who wrote the article read the quotes
Oh,
So
nice.
you hear the reporter reading the quotes, you see the reenactment, and you see our interpretation of that story.
See, that's excellent. That's what I'm talking about. Now, you took a story that, I mean, you couldn't possibly interview the guy because he was already dead.
Yep.
But you brought it to life. And so that's the cool thing about this film. And,
thank
you know, what I've seen of it, I haven't seen the whole thing, but what I've seen of it, I mean, you've done an amazing job on it and retelling the story of the Bridgewater Triangle.
Thank you.
Very well
Thank
done.
you.
So we actually have a question in the chat room.
Yes, we have a question from Stephen Scott.
He's from Scotland, by the way.
From Scotland. And he wants to know, are there identified areas of the triangle where occurrences or specific types of occurrences occur? Is there a center of specific activity?
I like to think of the Bridgewater Triangle as a buffet of the unexplained and the mysterious.
I like that too.
Because you got a 200 square mile region where you have anything ranging from cryptozoological sightings like Bigfoot sightings, reports of UFOs, reports of ghosts and hauntings, and then when you get down into the Freetown State Forest, you get an elevated level of criminal activity that's way off the charts for a town of 9,000 people. Right. So you have just a smorgasbord of different things. And within the triangle, you have the Hockomock Swamp, which is seen as the center of the Bridgewater Triangle, the heart of the Bridgewater Triangle. And that seems to be a location mostly associated with cryptozoological occurrences. Now, there's some other stuff mixed in there as well, but usually people think Hockomock Swamp, they think Bigfoot, they think thunderbirds, they think giant snakes, things of that nature. When you get down into the Freetown State Forest, like I mentioned, that seems to be an elevated level of sinister criminal activity. You had a lot of
body dumps.
Body dumps, you know, ritualistic activity, animal sacrifices, things of that nature, which aren't necessarily paranormal in and of themselves, but why they occur here seems to be tied into the overall concept of this Bridgewater Triangle and like a negative energy that exists in the Freetown State Forest. And then you go into towns like East Bridgewater and Rehoboth, which both seem to have an elevated level of hauntings or haunted locations and ghostly occurrences and things like that. So each section of the Bridgewater Triangle seems to be a hotbed for something else. But you know, like I said, you get some ghostly happenings in the reports of ghostly happenings in the Hockomock Swamp, just like you get reports of ghostly happenings and cryptozoological things in the Freetown State Forest. But each area seems to be specialized to one thing, more or less.
Definitely.
That's a good question, actually.
Yeah, and that was. I mean, I am in the film very briefly. Thank you.
So why are you in the film, by the way?
Well, they came to me.
I'm just curious.
The guys came to me and asked me
they
because they knew I had a
good-looking
paranormal
blonde,
group.
is that what it was?
Thank you. But they knew I had a group. You know, East Bridgewater's Most Haunted, and had the show for a little while on cable here in East Bridgewater. So we had been in a lot of homes here, and one in particular that I talk about in the movie
North Central Street.
Is on North Central Street, yeah, which is notoriously, I mean, I had so many people say to me, even before I ever got in the house, you know, this house is totally haunted, you need to check out this house. And I mean, we just had some strange things happen there. So just talked about that a little bit in the movie. And it's a very old home. You know, it's built around the 1700s.
Well, I'm going to have to see this movie just to see you in it,
so
that's all.
That's right.
That's all there is to it.
Get your popcorn and head in there.
So actually, aesthetically speaking, Anne's interviews is one of my favorites in the film. It just the way we shot her at like magic hour where the sun was kind of setting, you get that nice warm light. She was in front of a cemetery. It just is a very aesthetically pleasing looking
cemetery.
Yeah,
Why does that surprise me?
We were in front now. Imagine me in a cemetery.
Yeah, really.
But we were down, actually, we did the shoot right in front of the Hobart plot. And of course, the town hall, you know, was the Hobart estate. So I thought, oh, I have the perfect place where we could shoot this. Let's go down
Very
here.
cool. So I mean, I'm so enthralled with this whole concept. I mean, just the undertaking of doing it, which I go back to you. I mean, how did you even choose which stories to put into it?
That was a very difficult thing. I mean,
can't
especially
imagine.
when you talk about haunted houses. I mean, every town across the United States has haunted houses, locations that are allegedly haunted. So if we were to cover every single haunted house within the Bridgewater Triangle, you would have been talking about a 60-hour series that would have, you know, it would have been an impossible undertaking. So the way we attacked it is, we tried to get as many first-hand eyewitness accounts into the film that we could. I think that's the most credible when you're talking to somebody that says, I saw it, rather than somebody who says, my friend's cousin's roommate saw that.
Right.
So we got a lot of that, and we tried to get as many people that have reputations in terms of being experts in the field in the film. I mean, we were successful in getting some pretty big names in there, particularly Lauren Coleman and Jeff Belanger. Are world-renowned paranormal researchers and investigators, and we actually have Ken in there as well, in a sequence that was shot in the Freetown State Forest that actually we didn't shoot. It was shot by Andrew Lake and Chris Balzano on a Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting DVD.
Right. Did you call me Ken?
Was it Ron? I'm sorry, Ron. I knew. I see. I'm sorry, Ron.
Take the shirt off.
That's all right. You know what, Aaron? He screws everybody's name up on a regular basis. Yeah. Don't even feel bad.
I apologize, Ron.
No, don't apologize. Trust me, I mess everybody's name up.
He crucifies people's names.
It looks like we got another question from the chat room.
Oh,
anyway,
yes.
So I give you credit for that. That must have been a huge undertaking to go through all of them.
It was quite an undertaking.
Yeah. Okay.
Kat would like to know, at what point was this area of activity labeled a triangle?
Ah, good one.
Yeah.
What's the points of it?
The northern point is the town of Abington. The southeastern point is the town of Freetown. Southwestern point is the town of Rehoboth. Now, those are the traditional boundaries of the Bridgewater Triangle, which were first defined by Lauren Coleman. Actually, in a 1979 Boston Magazine article, was actually when he first came up with the term Bridgewater Triangle. But it came to national attention in his book, Mysterious America, which was published in 1983, and it has a section in that book that talks about the Bridgewater Triangle.
Okay. Wow. And I mean, it's like, you know, a smorgasbord, a buffet. I mean, everything that you can think of from the paranormal world is just kind of encompassed.
Right.
In this area, and you'll see this in the documentary as well. Mm-hmm. But I mean, and you have like the cryptids, strange creatures that no one has seen before. Anne Kerrigan, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So a little bit of everything.
So anyways, like I said before, we do have a bunch of other clips I want to get to anyways. So
yeah, I would say next we can probably roll the UFO sequence, which was UFO sighting by two, is that okay, former WHDH news reporters, Jerry Lopes and Steve Sprazier, who both claim to have seen this UFO, and you know, we'll let the clip tell the story.
Okay.
Although the Hockomock Swamp is often the focal point of the Bridgewater Triangle, paranormal activity has been reported throughout the entire 200-square-mile triangular region. Most often, it is reports of unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, that top the list of the unexplained. In 1908, a well-documented UFO sighting occurred in Bridgewater. Appropriately, two carriage-riding undertakers reported seeing the UFO on Halloween night. The object was described as an unusually bright lantern in the skies above the region.
Prior to my years as an investigator here, the 1970s in particular were a time of very high UFO activity in the Bridgewater Triangle. There were sightings along Route 44, in Raynham, in Taunton, very, very often.
The spring of 1979 proved to be the most active period of documented UFO sightings in the history of the Bridgewater Triangle region. A number of news outlets and law enforcement agencies were flooded with reports of large, low-flying UFOs. During that time, former WHDH reporters Jerry Lopes and Steve Sprazier claimed to have witnessed what is arguably the most famous UFO sighting to occur within the Bridgewater Triangle.
Jerry Lopes and I worked at WHDH Radio, and we were heading down to the Raynham dog track, and when we got off 24 onto 106, I noticed this really bright light over the tree line, and the light was coming closer and closer and getting bigger and bigger. And I remember saying to Jerry, "What is that over there?" So we pulled his vehicle over, and all of a sudden the stars blotted out in the shape of an arrow as this thing passed overhead.
Ironically, I'm a big baseball fan, it looked like a baseball home plate, and there were a series of lights on it.
And it was very, very wide. Perhaps the width of now, we'd say 5 747s wing to wing.
It looked like it had a little cord or something hanging off it, and sparks were coming off of it. I almost felt like I could throw a rock at the thing. It seemed that close to me.
This was pretty much the shape of it. And this thing passed overhead like this. For me, what first attracted me was this light that kind of came into our field of vision, just like that. And as this thing passed overhead, it just kept coming and coming and coming. And the light kept getting bigger and bigger.
I'm an Air Force veteran. I've been in the Air Force for 4.5 years. I've been around a number of different planes, and I said to Steve, that's not one of ours. And it just hovered there for a minute. It looked like it was over a little bit of a field, and the next thing you know, it just kind of just took off.
We continued on to the dog track.
Hey, we're back. What do you low? UFOs.
Yeah.
Okay, people always ask me, Ron, what do you think of UFOs? I always say, I got enough to worry about with ghosts to deal with that. He's kind of cool, though. He gets to do UFOs, gets to do ghosts, Bigfoot, I don't know, little puckwudgies running around.
Puckwudgies, yeah.
So UFO, I mean, here you got two credible sources.
Really?
I mean.
Yeah, you had two credible sources, and the interesting thing about that clip, as it says in that whole story in the clip, is a lot of witnesses in the area were claiming to have seen this large home plate-shaped object in the skies above the Bridgewater Triangle and the South Shore region in Massachusetts, just north of the triangle. So, and we actually, after those two gentlemen speak, we feature another gentleman named Ron Baker, who also claimed to have seen that same object in the sky above Easton. So it was a very interesting period.
That wasn't the same Baker that was...
No, that's John Baker.
John
Two
Baker.
unrelated Bakers in the film. Gets a
So
little confusing. Ron Baker, John Baker, not related.
No Ken Baker.
No Ken Baker. But Ron claimed to have seen this object as well, and at the time there were a lot of reports, and actually so many that the Brockton Enterprise ran an article about UFOs over Randolph, but it was more than just Randolph. It was, you know, the whole southeastern Massachusetts region,
Wow.
which was really interesting.
It really is. And I mean, we have a lot of questions coming in. We actually have some from our studio audience this evening, and one is Berkeley a part of the triangle?
Absolutely. The town of Berkeley is actually totally within the Bridgewater Triangle. You have some towns on the outskirts that part of it, depending on where you draw the lines, it might be in or out, but Berkeley is totally within the Bridgewater Triangle and is actually the location of Dighton Rock, which is along the banks of the Taunton River. Now, this is one of those things that ties into more of the mysterious, more so than the paranormal, but Dighton Rock is a large trapezoid-shaped boulder which was in the Taunton River for a really long time. There's a big flat face on it, which is covered with these inscriptions. And nobody has a real idea of where these inscriptions came from. You have a bunch of different theories as to where these inscriptions originated, but nobody has proven where these inscriptions came from. And so they pulled the rock out of the museum, out of the water to preserve it, stuck it in a museum in Berkeley. You can actually go there. It's part of the Massachusetts State Parks system. And so we have a section of the film that actually talks about Dighton Rock. And right across the river from Dighton Rock is a location called Grassy Island, which is also another story that ties into the lore of the Bridgewater Triangle, where back in the 30s, Professor Edmund Delabar from Brown University led an archaeological expedition onto Grassy Island, and they found some Native American remains there. And as the story goes, when they opened these tombs, the red ochre, which was very important to the Native American culture, mysteriously bubbled and dissolved away when they opened these tombs.
Ooh, that can't be good.
Wow.
And also, as you know, you hear with a lot of different stories about investigating paranormal areas, the photographs that they took at the time failed to develop. So that's one of the stories that we feature in the film, and that is interesting that it happened within, you know, a couple hundred yards of where Dighton Rock was located.
Wow. And now, as I recall in the movie, you had Derek Gunn.
That's correct.
Talk about the Dighton Rock in particular, because you know
he specializes in, you know, archaeological and geological oddities. So we featured him in the film. He was fantastic.
Yeah, he's just
very smart guy.
Really
is Dighton
huge
Rock,
wealth of knowledge.
Does Dighton Rock have any relationship to like the Narragansett Stone or the Newport Tower or anything? Do you know about?
We didn't investigate that deeply into it, but you know there are Derek Gunn actually points out that there are some faces carved on Dighton Rock, which are very similar to some faces that are found near a waterfall in Vermont. I don't know, I didn't investigate that too intensely, but so I think Derek Gunn kind of, well, maybe not Derek Gunn, but yeah, maybe Derek Gunn kind of thinks it's of a Native American origin, and that's one of the main theories of Dighton Rock. They're Native American origins, Viking, Portuguese, and Phoenician are the main theories as to where these inscriptions came from. And then there's the theory that it was more or less a billboard, and a lot of different cultures and civilizations carved on it.
Their own stuff.
Left their mark.
That's correct.
You know, the interesting thing about it is, you know, I know especially like ancient astronaut theorists, they always say, okay, well, you know, this is a drawing or a carving in a rock in Arizona, and here's one in Egypt, and that proves that they were, you know, visited by ancient. But unfortunately, we also have this thing called independent invention, where people think the same ideas without any relationship to each other. So it could be not necessarily proof. It could be just totally coincidence as well.
That's yeah. The bow and arrow is one of the things that comes to my mind.
Oh,
the Native Americans had bow and arrow. They had bow and arrow, and you know, in Europe and in Asia and all over the place. So where did the bow and arrow first come from? Who knows?
Ancient astronauts, just the alien theories. But anyways,
right.
So
and we have another question from our audience, right?
Okay.
Oh, the other question was, what was your favorite area in the triangle?
And why?
And why?
As a skeptic, as a Dartmouth resident, I was always drawn to the Freetown State Forest because that was a lot of documented criminal activity that was indisputable. So you had a lot of hard, concrete evidence of these various occurrences in Freetown. So the Freetown State Forest is my favorite location in the Bridgewater Triangle.
Okay, and that, of course, you have footage in the film of Maureen being, whether you're skeptical or not,
sure.
Whether the possession by the Pukwudgies.
And you were there for that.
I was there for that. But you only have one, that actually happened twice during the investigation. And the lead to that is that Chris Bozano, who was doing the piece for his book, and Andrew Lake went to not Dighton Rock, what's Anasquaba Ridge there, whatever it is.
Oh, the Assonet Ledge.
Thank you very much. And my group went through the woods, through the trails. And as we were going through the trails, we kept, you know, had just a feeling that we're being watched. So Thermal Dam, who was a fire chief, had a thermal imager with her. And we're talking about not just one of these little flares ones at the time. It's like a, you know, $15,000 unit. And we kept picking up shadows in the woods. And so what had happened, we were almost got to the ledge, and I was in the head, and they all said, Ron, come back quick. And what happened, the shadow stopped and was in like a tree trunk like this. And then you couldn't see it with your eye, you could only see it on a thermal imager. Then all of a sudden, it got bigger and bigger and started getting closer. And it morphed into you ever see the face from Scream?
Sure.
It actually morphed into that. And it just, that's when it hit Maureen, and she got possessed the first time, which was not cool. But anyways, so that's originally how that happened. So we actually have video footage of that morphing and some other stuff that happened on that, which is
that Pukwudgies, it's called When Pukwudgies Attack on YouTube. There's tens of thousands of views of that video on. I think there's like 38,000 views of that on YouTube. So it's a pretty popular clip.
Yeah.
Can we just explain for our listening and viewing audience what a Pukwudgie is?
Chris Bozano.
Pukwudgies are 3 to 4 foot tall creatures associated with Wampanoag folklore. And in the history of the Wampanoag tribe, they originated as more of a mischievous type creature, and by the time of the colonial contact, they had more or less developed a reputation as being pure evil, according to what Chris Balzano says and according to what I've researched. And a lot of these Pukwudgie sightings have allegedly taken place in the Freetown State Forest. So we actually talk about the Pukwudgies in the Freetown State Forest section of the film.
And the idea is that they used to lead people to their demise by following the lights into the woods and so forth.
That's correct, yeah. They would try to draw their victims in, according to the legend.
And the footage that Andrew have, I think either the one Andrew has or I has of that attack, you can actually see after it's over. And for those who don't know, Maureen gets possessed, and I come in from behind, grab her, and a full Nelson throw her on the ground. And Bozano comes flying in and grabs her feet. And but anyways, as that Pukwudgie is being released from her spiritually or whatever, You can see a light that rises. I don't know if you saw that footage.
No, we didn't see it in the footage, and unfortunately, the only record of that footage that exists now is YouTube. The raw is missing or whatever. So yeah, so that all I could do for that was to just actually download it directly from YouTube. But yeah, it's an interesting part of the film for sure.
So Freetown is your favorite spot?
Freetown's my favorite spot, and I guess that would be a good time to jump into our last clip, which involves the murder of a 15-year-old girl in Raynham named Mary Lou Arruda. It was a very high-profile case at the time.
I remember that.
And she was actually brought to the Freetown State Forest by the gentleman who committed that crime, and we'll let the clip tell the story.
Okay.
Although satanic-related crimes and activity often dominate headlines relating to the Freetown State Forest, the area has also been associated with a number of isolated crimes, odd occurrences, and paranormal activity. In 1978, the remains of 15-year-old Raynham resident Mary Lou Arruda were found tied to a tree in the forest.
Mary Lou Arruda was on her bicycle on a dirt road in Raynham, and she was knocked off her bike and kidnapped, brought to the state forest in Freetown, and subsequently murdered. Her body was found 2 months later in November of '78 by 2 dirt bike riders. They said, we found a headless body tied to a tree. It was like a week after Halloween, so I figured it must be a dummy. And they brought me to the area. They wouldn't go near it. They pointed up there, and I walked up the hill, and sure enough, it was a headless body of a female tied to the tree.
Eventually, 32-year-old James Cater was tried and convicted of the kidnapping and murder. The death of Mary Lou Arruda is often confused with crimes committed by the Fall River satanic cult.
Although the James Cater case, Mary Lou Arruda case had absolutely nothing to do with a satanic crime, unfortunately her body was found near some of that activity.
His defense attorney basically put forth the theory that a cult had killed Arruda and not him. This kind of led to an attaching that he was perhaps involved with a cult, and that's what happened.
I had to testify in that case and say, in my opinion, had nothing to do with that. He appealed it several times, got 3 or 4 trials, but he's still doing life in prison for that crime.
And we're back.
Yeah, that was a really
chilling.
Yeah, and so sad.
Do you remember this?
I remember that, yeah.
Were you like 3 years old?
No, yeah. In '78, I was 3 years old. But no, I very clearly remember when that happened, and I was actually in a scholarship pageant with her younger sister.
Beauty pageant?
Not a beauty pageant. Scholarship pageant.
Yeah, that part of the film gets a little heavy.
Yeah.
It's a very sad case. And we don't talk about it too extensively, but it just serves as an example of the kind of criminal element that the Freetown State Forest seems to draw. It's an interesting part of the film.
Yeah.
Speaking about criminal element, one of the members of our audience was actually there too, and I believe he was in the film. Nate?
Yeah, bring Nate around real quick. Nate, why don't you come around? We got a funny story regarding Nate. And I'm going to address this specifically to my mom.
Just stand like
here's
on the
Nate.
other side of Aaron. There you go.
And Nate is actually featured in the film, and when we edited the film together, we didn't know who Nate was, so of course we blurred out his face because we didn't have his consent. Now, there is a likeness between Nate and myself.
Yes, there kind of is.
There is a likeness there.
Yeah.
Now, there's footage of Nate walking through the Freetown State Forest, so I blurred out his face, edited the film together. My parents go to the premiere. My mother says, hey, you put yourself in that documentary. And I'm like, there is no footage of me in that documentary. And she goes, you can't tell me that. You're my only child. You're my only son. I know you when I see you. You were walking through the Freetown State Forest and you blurred your face out. And I said, Mom, that's not me. As a kid, I don't know who he is. But here he is, Nate, my look-alike.
There you go. Separated by birth.
So this is the man that's in the footage, not me. It's Nate.
All right.
Sorry, his mom.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you, Nate.
All right, we got to take a couple of questions from the chat room.
Yes,
so.
we do have some more questions.
You never know what's going to happen in the show, do you?
No, I know, right? Kat wants to know, what are the oldest reports known in this specific area?
The oldest is a UFO report stemming from 1760, which we actually didn't talk about in the film because we didn't have a lot to go with on it. But It's the first, it's often cited as the first UFO sighting in documented history in the United States. And it occurred
That was in
in
Belange's book,
1760.
we in Massachusetts,
And it was described as like a sphere of fire flying through the sky. Maybe it was a meteor, a comet, who knows. But that was in 1760. And then after that, in 1908, there were 2 carriage-riding undertakers, which you saw in the UFO clip, who allegedly saw an unusual floating lantern in the skies above the region, and it was actually occurred on Halloween night, which makes it a little more mysterious.
Wow.
So 2 undertakers driving their carriage see a UFO on Halloween night.
On Halloween. What are the odds? What are the odds?
I like it.
The next question is from Stephen Scott, and says, is it the triangle or any areas of significance within the triangle? Are they near any
ley lines.
form of ley lines?
Ley lines meaning?
Or any other areas of specific spiritual or religious significance.
Ley lines are energy lines. Supposedly, if you connect Stonehenge to like the pyramids.
We got this kind of a question on Coast to Coast AM, and I didn't really have an answer for it then. And unfortunately,
well, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning.
In terms of religious and spiritual significance, the Hockomock Swamp was sacred to the Native American people long before the white man ever settled in this area, and the whole southeastern Massachusetts region was a highly populated area by Native American indigenous people before the white man settled here. And a lot of researchers see King Philip's War as the negative event which possibly sparked the occurrences and negative energies that are associated with the Bridgewater Triangle. So there's a lot of tie-in with Native American folklore and culture with the Bridgewater Triangle, specifically King Philip's War.
Well, that's kind of, we don't know, because there is no really written history from Native Americans, so we don't know if anything ever occurred before the...
I mean, the Native American tribes fought each other long before the white man ever settled here, and that was one of the things that the white man exploited when they landed here, were intertribal rivalries and hate, and long-seated hatreds that went back thousands of years. So if anything significant happened here before the white man got here, we don't know. We will never know.
Well, what about the Pukwudgie legend now? The Pukwudgie legend was predated this as well, so they're already talking about entities that are not nice.
Exactly.
So maybe, I don't know. I really don't know. That's the cool thing about a mystery.
Yeah.
So anyways, another question, which is from John, and I'll let you read it because I can't read.
When will the film be available for sale in stores or online?
Ooh.
If you go to our website, thebridgewatertriangledocumentary.com, right on the front, we just released it about a week ago. You can now watch the film on demand on Vimeo, which is a new service that Vimeo launched, Vimeo on Demand for $5.99. You get a 24-hour rental of the film. Watch it at your convenience. If you want to see it in person, we have a whole list of upcoming shows on the website. The next show, we have a little bit of a lull here, is March 21st at Uplifting Connections, which is a spiritual store in Bridgewater. And we have a bunch of screenings coming up after that, so you just go to the website, we give you the time, the place, and the information on how to order tickets.
Wow.
Sweet.
And you guys have really created just a huge splash with this documentary. Did you ever expect the huge response that you've had?
I knew there would be an interest in the subject matter just because the Bridgewater Triangle has almost an international following, especially within the paranormal community. Right. But when we put tickets on sale for the premiere and we filled 750 people into the UMass Dartmouth auditorium, it was very humbling, and it just, I remember that day just watching the line of people coming into the theater, and it just was really humbling. And then a week later we showed it at Bridgewater State, 450 people, sold out, and that was going head to head with the Red Sox playing in the World Series. So that was really special. And ever since then we've sold out about 80% of our shows.
That's awesome.
And we've been featured on a bunch of high-profile shows, and it just keeps growing. So we're very, very excited about it.
That is great.
We actually have some interest from a very high-profile network as well that came to us and are interested in the U.S. broadcast rights. So I can't say too much more about it, but this may get a national audience sooner rather than later.
Terrific.
Which would be great, absolutely great. Not only for you, but also for America. I mean, I think, like I said, I haven't seen it, so I mean, I'm kind of talking in the dark, but I know so much about the Bridgewater Triangle, and what I have seen from what you have done with it, it's pretty amazing. So I mean, this will be, you could be the official documentary of the Bridgewater Triangle.
Right now we're the only one, the only feature length.
Yeah.
But,
They are the official video.
But we have people like you to thank for allowing us to come on and talk about this. So
Oh.
it was an honor to be on your show today.
Oh, we had an hour to fill, so what the hell.
Well, we're glad that you could make it. And
So what do you have coming up? Do you have any future plans for any more documentaries?
Yeah, I don't know about another documentary on the paranormal. I'd love to do a documentary on the highway murders. I don't know if you remember, the highway murders took place in the late 80s between the highways of New Bedford and Fall River. About 11 prostitutes wound up dead,
Yes.
found on the highways between those two cities.
Yeah.
And they never solved the case. It's a very high-profile case, the deadliest serial killer in New England history.
Even more than the Boston Strangler?
Even more than the Boston Strangler.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
And they never solved the case. It's a very interesting case with a lot of different tentacles and elements to it, and I would love to do a documentary on that. I think that would be my next topic.
Oh,
And
that's really
people
exciting.
don't really understand what goes into, producing a documentary like this.
This was a massive undertaking with a minimal budget and people wearing a lot of hats. I mean, this was essentially a two-man operation, and just from my own perspective, I wrote it, co-directed it, produced it, edited it, did the sound design, did the special effects,
Wow.
put together the graphics, for the posters and the marketing, and Manny did the time lapses and a lot of research that went into this. So it's been exhausting. Especially the 10-month editing process was just an obsession.
Yeah.
In order to do something like this, you have to be a little bit OCD.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to get it done. So it's made me a little crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even imagine editing something of this magnitude. And I mean, I edit here at the studio and I love it, but I don't know. This is daunting.
It was, and it was all done while working full time. So it was done, after my wife and daughter would go to bed, and I'd be down there editing till like 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God.
So I mean,
wow.
When you developed this, and you said you wrote it and everything else, so you had a storyline in mind.
Yeah, and the foundation of the script was based on the first film that I did in college. I mean, that was only a 30-minute film, so this thing's 3 times as long as that. So that kind of served as the foundation, but with Manny's help and some of the research that he had done and some of his contacts, we were able to make it a lot bigger and grander, and we managed to cover a lot of ground in 90 minutes.
Wow, yeah, you did.
So
I just wanted to mention, I know we had said that Manny was also going to be here this evening, but he had a family emergency and unfortunately couldn't come. But, obviously,
What's
big
one
part
less
of the
name
movie.
for me to remember?
Yeah,
Right?
I don't know if he could pronounce his last
Yeah, I
name.
could never. So once again, your website, could you give that out for us again?
The Bridgewater Triangle Documentary.com. BridgewaterTriangle.com will also take you to the same place. And like I said, we have a list of upcoming shows. You can click the link to watch the video on demand through Vimeo.
Can people get these cool T-shirts?
You can order T-shirts at our store,
have
coffee
cool
mugs,
T-shirts.
the full-size 27 by 40 movie posters, the small 11 by 17 movie posters.
Excellent.
Oh
We
my.
have quite a bit of merchandise
Covered
there.
all the bases.
T-shirts have been very popular, so we're pretty excited about that.
Oh, we're excited about it too.
Exactly. I'm going to be wearing this at
I'll
the
wear
health
mine
club.
tomorrow.
I'll be wearing this at the health club.
Can I mention a couple of other in-person screenings?
Absolutely.
We have the Uplifting Connections on March 21st. On April 11th, which is a Friday, we have a show in Dedham, and it's going to be a meet and greet with Jeff Belanger. He'll be there.
Oh, that's a shame.
Oh.
So those are and we have another show on April 26th up in Danvers. It's the Goddess Speaks events. It's on our website. It's like a small private gathering showing the film. I think there's still tickets available for that as well.
Oh,
and that
cool.
should be a pretty cool event as well.
I think this is so funny because here he is so skeptical. He's in places like, I don't know, the Goddess Speaks and whatever. And
All right, we have to wrap this up now.
what does that mean?
Yeah, we have to wrap it up. You need to stop talking.
Oh, fine.
Okay. All right.
All right. So anyways, we want to thank everybody for tuning in. And
Yes. Thank you to Aaron for being our guest tonight.
Absolutely.
And
for having me.
our fabulous crew here, Emily,
And our
Zach,
audience.
Russ, and Mike, and our audience. And we will see you again. Well, we'll talk to you again next week, but we'll see you again the first Wednesday in April.
maybe.
Maybe? All right. Thanks for watching. Oh, we got applause.
Good night and God bless.
Good night, everybody.
From goalies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.